Hey, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Scenes, a podcast about the intersection of art, culture, and big ideas. I am your host, Sean Malone, creative director for the Foundation for Economic Education and creator of Out of Frame, video essay series on YouTube. Paul, not with us today in studio, but of course, Jen Maffasanti. Slacker, I know. Jen Maffasanti, head of communications director for the Libertas Institute in Utah, on the screen in front of me, next to me. I'm not really sure what side she's going to be on in this case, but probably here. I'm going to pretend. Anyway, Jen, how are you doing? How's Utah?
I'm doing well. Utah's gorgeous. Fall arrived. It's my birthday.
I know.
Things are good.
It's a big happy birthday to Jen. When you hear this, of course, it will not be her birthday anymore, tragically, but it is her birthday today, and that's very exciting. What people probably don't know, because I don't think we've ever talked about it, Jen officiated my wedding. So Facebook, in their infinite wisdom, giving me like all of the collection of photos or whatever, just like brought up a whole bunch of wedding photos for me today because it's your birthday. So that was fun.
Yeah, and your anniversary is coming up as well, so that'll be great.
Yeah. But anyway, that's awesome. Did you have you gotten any awesome presents from family so far?
From family, yeah, I got some 2-part epoxy resin, which I actually asked for, so that's
very
cool.
Exciting. What do you plan to do with that?
Crafty things. I haven't quite fully decided yet. Just you know what? I'm going to do whatever I want to with it.
That's awesome. That is, by the way, the like as you become an adult, I feel like the presents get weirder.
Yes.
You have more control over them, but because now, if anybody gets me anything, it's usually like, what do you want first? Like people ask. And I usually don't have an answer for it, but it is funny that the more you become an adult, the more your presents do become things like epoxy resin.
Yeah.
2-part epoxy. Oh, cool. I could I don't know, make a table or something with, I don't know how much you got. Maybe you can't make a table, but
I could at least top a table. Nice. I have about a gallon right now. When you combine both parts together.
Yeah,
so
that could be.
I could do a glaze on top of a table. I have some ideas. I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos.
There's a guy. I think it's Blacktail Studios, which I watch. He does do kind of the same thing over and over and over again, but he makes these $15,000 walnut tables where he takes black resin. And he cleans up all the gaps and the burls and all the various things inside the table, and then typically fills them with black resin, and then obviously does a ton of finishing work on them. They are so pretty. A mutual friend of ours, Chris Wilcox, who's a really good woodworker. And is a really good friend of mine, but he often mocks the resin woodworking stuff, but I still think it's really cool, and I would absolutely have a table.
Yeah,
I
would for sure
have a cool table like that, but
I don't think that's going to be project one. I don't want to risk ruining $1,000 worth of live edge walnut or anything like that. But
I wouldn't do it myself. This is, and by the way, not $1,000, $7,000 of walnut.
Yeah. It's going to be a while before I can work up to making my new dining room table or whatever. But this is a start. You got to start somewhere. And before you can get good at anything, you got to be bad at it first. So,
I think I would try to make, or at least maybe try to make D&D scale, scenes, because I see people do that a lot, make really cool models and stuff. I'm blown away by some people's ability to make, miniature, environments, terrain, whatever. Use resin to create waterfalls and stuff. That stuff is wild. I don't know how you do that.
It's really incredible. I am definitely going to be leaning on my brother for a lot of this stuff because he
Yeah.
does do miniatures and he's amazing at it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's going to be a whole thing. I'm really looking forward to it. As soon as I get out of quarantine, because my
Oh, yeah.
son got COVID.
Womp womp.
Womp womp.
He's
He's
doing
fine,
okay?
by the way. He's doing real well. He had a very, very mild case. He's already feeling better. He can't go back to school for like another week, but
Yeah.
and the rest of us were negative.
Yeah.
So that's good. Happy birthday to me with my negative COVID test.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where we're at. How are you doing?
Good. Yeah, I've been through, I don't know if I've ever talked about this on the show, but like I've actually been through a household full of COVID twice in like a really significant way. My wife and mother-in-law both had COVID, and then and so I was around all of that. Never tested positive. Then a friend of ours actually had COVID, and we actually brought her to our house so that she lived alone, and we didn't want her and she actually had a relatively severe case, nothing that needed to be hospitalized, but we didn't want her to deal with that alone, so we brought her to our house, and I went through all of that right next to her, not really distancing or anything, and totally fine. Never tested positive there either, but have tested positive for antibodies, which is kind of a weird thing because I've never actually tested positive for the disease, but I did test positive for antibodies to a significant degree as well. So like it wasn't just like barely over the line on a positive antibody test. It was like 120 times the amount of antibodies that I would need to count as a positive result. So I'm feeling a little invincible with respect to COVID. I don't know if that's wise. But,
I have never tested positive for it either. And
yeah.
So like, which is weird for me because I'm immunocompromised. Like
Yeah.
I catch everything, all of the things that like nobody catches.
It's really
except
good.
for this one.
I've been told
apparently.
that blood type may have something to do with it, but I am not really sure. So
I don't know.
Who knows? Today on the show, I do want to say, like, today we're going to be talking about some science fiction on TV, and I'm pretty excited about this. We're going to be talking about the Foundation series that is really brand new on Apple TV, and it's I think we're only a couple episodes in at the time of this recording. Obviously, by the time you guys hear this, there may be another episode or two out, but I do want to talk about that. Before I get into that, though, I want to say I finally finished Brandon Sanderson's. I'm caught up. I would say finished because he's not finished with the series, but I have finished What Exists of the Stormlight series that Brandon Sanderson wrote, and it was fantastic. And and then I also finished his writing workshop because Jen had recommended this. If you guys are not signed up for our email list, by the way. One of the things you should, so you absolutely check the link in the description on this podcast and check out the email list for Out of Frame. But one of the things we do every week is recommend something to watch or read or whatever. Jen recently recommended watching Brandon Sanderson's 11-part, 12-part lecture series from his class at Brigham Young University, where he teaches a writing course on science fiction and fantasy. If you're interested in writing, I can't recommend this more. He is a phenomenal teacher. He would have been one of the best.
His whole channel is just gold. If you are at all interested in writing
100%.
Like anything, just check out his channel. Yeah. It's outstanding. I'm going to try to go see him in November. He's got
fantastic.
Like a little miniature con happening
awesome.
in Provo. And I'm going to try to go see him. We'll see how that works.
I would fully support that. Look, so it's interesting because like taking creative advice from people is a little weird sometimes because there are a lot of, I think one of the best pieces of advice, almost breaking what I'm about to say, breaking my point in a way. one of the best pieces of advice I've ever heard is really don't take advice from somebody whose work you wouldn't consume. If there's somebody who, makes movies that you hate or, writes books that you don't like building your career off their model doesn't make a lot of sense. Even if they're good, or even if they're popular, even if other people like their stuff, it's probably just not good advice for you. You may be able to learn some stuff from them for sure. Brandon Sanderson, though, my wife introduced me to him fairly recently. I had not really read any of his stuff at all until Stormlight. I found Stormlight to be really exceptional. And there's a lot of terrible sci-fi out there, and I think we'll get into that a little bit with Foundation, because I think there are a lot. I have this problem with science fiction in cinema and in TV as well. There's just a lot of garbage, and it's really hard to find really good stuff. And Sanderson is great, and so right off the bat, when you recommended his writing workshop, I was like, well, this is a guy that I would listen to. This is a guy whose writing I think is exceptional. And so, even if I didn't want to take aspects of his advice, I definitely want to listen. I definitely want to know what it is. And it turns out he would have been one of the best professors or teachers I ever had. He's great to listen to. He's fun. He's funny. He's witty. He's really engaging as a speaker, as a teacher.
He admits when he's wrong.
He admits when he's wrong. He admits when he doesn't know stuff. It's really unfiltered in a very good way. You don't get any of the sense of pretentiousness from him at all that you get with, other people. And this is a guy who is one of the top selling fantasy and sci-fi writers of all time. So, this is somebody you should equate to a George R.R. Martin type person easily. He's certainly written more books that have sold more. He obviously doesn't have a giant, mega hit TV franchise yet. Although, and that's the thing. He also, Sanderson finished the Wheel of Time series. So obviously he didn't write all of it, but he did finish the Wheel of Time series. And so, I believe he's consulting on the show.
I think so
as well. He should be if he's not. It would be a terrible mistake not to call him in for something.
You can't consult with Robert Jordan himself, so you got to go to the guy who finished the series, basically. Yeah,
I think he's your option at this point if you're going to get a legitimate consultant. But I don't know. Anyway, I totally enjoyed that. And I'm definitely going to continue on to maybe Mistborn or something else that he's written. So I'm pretty excited about that. But let's talk about Foundation. So Foundation, written by Isaac Asimov. Again, one of the great sci-fi writers of all time. One of my favorites growing up. And yet, strangely, knowing as I did that Foundation was one of his most popular and well-known, well-read, most widely read series, I am fairly certain that I read at least a book or two of it. They're very short. When I was a kid, I didn't remember anything about it. That's not quite true. I remembered almost nothing about it until I heard the words, maybe in the trailer or maybe just in the first episode, psychohistory. And we will get into that in a minute, because the minute that I heard that word, a lot of things about Foundation kind of came back to me. Not everything. I don't really remember the plot all that well in terms of the books. But again, I'm not sure that I read all of it. But psychohistory was the thing that really stood out to me. And we'll have to talk about that in a second. But Jen, let's get into Foundation. Do you want to maybe set us up a little bit, describe the world?
Sure. So, okay. Foundation is set in the far future, okay? Humanity has expanded basically across the galaxy, right? They have faster than light travel, just all kinds of just sci-fi things, that you expect. And this is one of I hate to say this, but this is a foundational work of science fiction.
Yeah,
okay?
Yeah, it is. The core planet has a space elevator. Like literally,
yes, it does. It has
giant...
a space elevator. Like it's really fascinating. Asimov is to science fiction what J.R.R. Tolkien is to fantasy.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's just what it is.
Yeah.
He also wrote I, Robot, which is
and those are the books
in the same universe.
Those are the books that I actually remember a lot more. I spent a lot more time reading stuff like I, Robot, or there's a book called Caliban, things like that like were more about, and you'll probably have heard this before too. If you know anything about science fiction, you'll probably heard the term the 3 laws of robotics, which is Asimov, and that came from iRobot and all of the related artificial intelligence based series that he did, Android kind of based series. Asimov is crazy important to the history of science fiction. It's actually kind of astounding that not more of his stuff has been turned into movies.
And I think that this is because Asimov was so ahead of his time that we didn't have the technology that we would have needed to visually create the worlds that he imagined before, like nowish, really.
Yeah, if you go back to the movie iRobot, which is not the book very much, some basic premise stuff is similar, but that doesn't, like, visually doesn't hold up super well. The CG for the robot, the main robot character, that's not great. I think I'd have to go back and see. There's a Robin Williams movie called Bicentennial Man that I believe was also based off of Asimov story. I don't remember the movie that well. But it's very Asimovian kind of story where the robot is trying to become more human over time. But if you look at that movie, we actually use a few clips from that movie in the Free Guy episode of Out of Frame, because we're talking about artificial intelligence. And it's like, I mean, it might as well be like Robot Man from Doom Patrol. I mean, it's this big, clunky, weird, humanoid head. I mean, it's just like, it's Robin Williams, but like dressed up with like a plastic, metallic painted robot head and whatnot.
Like, it's not great.
It doesn't quite work the way that you would want it to. Foundation though, I have nothing bad to say so far about the visual design, the set design, the art direction, the production, the visual effects so far for Foundation on Apple TV has really phenomenal. I've been super impressed by that.
Yeah. No, it is a gorgeous show. But basically, the premise of the show is that we have a galactic empire in place, okay? And it's been there for like 12,000 years at this point. And this is where psychohistory comes into play. This brilliant mathematician has developed a formula that can, based on statistical analysis of history, predict with some level of accuracy significant historical events that have yet to happen. And he's in trouble because he has predicted the collapse of this galactic empire.
Oh, man. So I have so many problems with this, just as a core concept. It's also very like Marxist, like Herbert Marcuse had this idea of, not the only one, a lot of the Frankfurt School guys had this idea that like if you knew history, you could predict the future because it was all science. I mean, and this is where I talked about this a little bit in the episode that we did on Black Widow, where I talked about this idea of dialectical materialism and like being able to see history as phases that are inevitable. Like Marx kind of thought that capitalism would go through this phase. This is where you get the phrase late stage capitalism, right? Like the end of capitalism stuff, because it was like inevitable that would turn into socialism, which inevitably would turn into communism, and then communism would be our great stateless utopia at the end of history, basically. Like he literally used terms like the end of history, right? This is where we would.
Do we get a smoke monster too?
Oh my God! And so, but these ideas are. I cannot put this any more delicately. I mean, I can, but I don't want to. It's stupid. It's a stupid idea. It's just like and psychohistory in Foundation is basically the same. Conceptually, it's the same thing. It's like I'm smart enough to analyze all of the events in the past and analyze big statistical trends in population and human behavior and whatnot, and then make specific predictions about events that are going to happen. And it's so much worse than even being able to say like, well, here's this ultra complex system that we know as the weather, and I'm going to predict an hour from now, or 2 days from now, or next week, right? He's making predictions 500 years from now, thousands of years from now. His prediction is basically like within 500 years the empire is going to collapse. First of all, how's that even useful? But secondly, like, where did your data come from, sir? Like, how do you have any? You don't have inputs for any of this stuff. And that's always the problem. And for me, and this is not the fault of the show, because this is part of Asimov's book, but it really hurts my ability to suspend disbelief for the show. Because I would just look at this and go, well, you're a crackpot, and I am super not taking you seriously, because everything about what you're doing is nonsense from its premise on up. Like, there is no way to do that. And, I want to suspend disbelief because this is like the premise of the concept, right? Like, it's the whole concept that Asimov is basing this on. But it's too close to things that we've seen in reality that have had such disastrous consequences that I don't like even accepting it as the basis for action, And so I don't know. That hurts me a little bit on the show. I don't know if you feel the same way, but it definitely is like, oh my God, that's dumb. And I don't, it can't end well.
Yeah, and I don't think it's going to end well.
It won't. I'm not going to...
Full disclosure,
yeah.
I have not read these books. My husband has read these books. He's actually a big Asimov fan. And he tells me that the show is very divergent from the core source material. But, being a fan of sci-fi and fantasy, I have trained myself to suspend disbelief for fairly nonsense concepts. Like, I can do it, but I have other quibbles with this show so far because, as we said, there are only 2 episodes out at the time of this recording, and while the pilot did a really great job of creating intrigue and, oh my goodness, what is going on? What is happening? I need to know more about this world. Episode 2 had some issues with character behavior and not setting things up properly. But we can get into that later. But if that's the premise of this show, I want to see where they take it.
Right.
I want to see if they're going to try to glorify and justify this psychohistory stuff, or if they're going to be like, nope, it is actual garbage and it doesn't work, and the end. So we'll see.
Yeah. So I don't remember Foundation as well as I wish I did, I guess. I will say, to its credit, to Asimov's credit, but I have no idea what they're going to do in the show. To Asimov's credit, psychohistory does not go the way that the guy who created the mathematician that Jen mentioned, his character's name is Harry Seldon. It doesn't go the way Harry Seldon predicts. Like it does go off the rails. Yeah. So even Asimov recognized, and I think to some extent critiques this idea that you can have this level of prediction and that like this sort of arrogance of man, I think, in a lot of ways, part of the theme of the Foundation series. But ultimately, by the way, what the reason it's called Foundation is because once Harry Seldon predicts the collapse of the Empire, he is predicting basically a several millennia dark ages. And in order to stop that from happening, he proposes and is sort of granted the ability to create a galactic encyclopedia, basically. Like this is ultimately what the show is probably going to be about, is really the difficulty. I'm sure it's going to be about the politics of the universe, but interplayed with or maybe intercut with this outpost that they have created at the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of the, I don't know, yeah, I guess the edge of the galaxy, where a small group of people led by Harry Seldon and Gal Dornick, who's the other kind of main character, an apprentice to him, are going to lead the creation of the collection of all of the most important knowledge that's ever existed on any planet. That too is just a thing that just reeks of this kind of centralized, central planning kind of arrogance that, this just utter void of epistemic humility, right? Like it's something that's so important to be able to recognize, is that like knowledge is decentralized. It is exceptionally decentralized. Every individual person on the planet has just this tiny little piece of knowledge and what they think is important and what they know and what skills they have and what values they have. All that stuff is really just unique to them. And the idea that you would have some politically appointed group of, 100 people or whatever, collecting the most important knowledge for, billions or trillions of people, probably trillions in this universe, just seems so insane to me. I mean, granted, it's probably better than having nothing at the end of, at the collapse of a giant intergalactic empire or whatever. But you're still allowing a tiny group of people to decide what's important, and they're extremely ignorant. Like, they're just inherently extremely ignorant of basically 99.9999999 keep going 99% of knowledge in the universe. So
I will say this for that concept. There is a scene in episode 2 where Gail has to sit in on a planning session on how they're going to allocate their resources and their time to collecting and preserving all of this knowledge. And they're starting like towards the center where most of the population is. And she makes a really great point. She's like, well, this is all, let's talk about base 10 counting, because all of the planets that you've mentioned there use base 10. But there are literally hundreds of other systems that use base 12 and or base 27. Yeah. And how do we even begin to start counting all of this if we can't even agree on how to count?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think
and that was an outstanding scene.
I agree. That was an outstanding scene. And I think it's really a great little moment that gets at exactly this point. Like, you can't... It's not that I would be coming out against the idea of collecting information into a centralized encyclopedia, right? There's value in trying to do that. But there's only value in trying to do that if it's accompanied by a lot of humility, right? Knowing that like what you're putting in there is only what you discovered. It's only what you were made aware of at any point, and it's only what you decided was important. And you could be wrong about that. There could be missing information. There could be wrong information. There could be stuff that's like extremely important that you just omitted because you never heard of it before, and being very cautious about that, I think, is really important. And that's why I agree with you. I like that scene a lot because it did show that Gale, at least, is a little bit cautious about the way that they're approaching this. Harry Seldon seems a lot less cautious about the way that he's approaching this, which is, and I don't know that that's entirely fair because he has been kind of deified by a lot of the other characters, like he became this kind of weird prophet, kind of a doomsayer as well. And that's part of why ultimately they kind of get exiled because, well, not kind of, they literally get exiled because, he's prophesizing the end of the empire, and turns out that the government doesn't like that very much. But I don't, I suppose this isn't that big of a spoiler because it is really in the first episode and it's really, critical setup to the entire series. But basically, I mentioned that they have this giant space elevator on the sort of the central planet, and a terrorist, or a group of terrorists actually, decide to blow the space elevator up, killing 100 million citizens, and of course wrecking this massive structure that is critically important to their everything. I mean, their economy, their ability to travel, everything. So, this happens. And it's a very clear sign that there's a lot of unrest inside the empire that really drives home the point that, like, this is an empire collapsing, But it also kind of undercuts Harry Seldon saying it could happen in a 500-year period because it's like, well, it happened tomorrow. So it's like, that window was not a very helpful or precise window. You're telling me.
Yeah. And to be fair, it really didn't take advanced math to figure out that the empire was on the decline here.
No,
guys.
No. Yeah, we should talk about that real quick too, because the way that the empire, for hundreds of years, it's been controlled by a trio of clones, basically. So they decided that there was like one genetic line of emperors. And they decided that the best way to do this was to clone them in succession such that as one became an adult, they cloned another one and then always had essentially a grandpa, like an elder, the emperor, in this case, Lee Pace's character, he's called Brother Day. He's the emperor. You've got an elder, and you've got the emperor, and then you've got the upcoming heir, basically, at all times. And you've got the cycle kind of going. But they all get trained the same way. They all get taught the same stuff. They all essentially get the same advice because they're just clones of each other, just going in this one kind of cyclical loop. And so it's a very stagnant political system, and the power is so heavily concentrated that even right off the bat, you get some scenes of ambassadors from other worlds kind of, mocking quietly, right, in a way that they're hopefully not heard by the emperor, but they're kind of mocking the just the imperial power. Well, yeah, there's clearly civil unrest all over the place. And there's clearly a lot of people who are super unhappy with the empire the way that it is, which is not surprising. It's it's very authoritarian. It reminds me a little bit. I mean, and again, this is Foundation is in a lot of ways archetypal for other science fiction, but it kind of reminds me of Firefly a little bit, where there's like this central authority, and then there's all of these outer worlds, the outer rim worlds that don't really, they're forced to comply with imperial edicts, but they don't really like it. They're not really happy with it. They just don't have enough power collectively to do anything about it, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it does not take a mathematical genius to put together that, like, there's people unhappy with the authoritarian rule that's you know, the 500 years of authoritarianism that they've lived under in this empire. Probably thousands of years, really, right? So,
yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, and then that's the thing. Like, this is after the again. This is a big spoiler, so I'm gonna say skip ahead, 2 minutes or whatever. The big thing is that in response to this terrorist attack, Emperor Day, Lee Pace's character, imprisons some of the ambassadors from the worlds that he believes are responsible, and then ends up like using his ridiculously powerful technology to genocide both of their home worlds, essentially. It just feels like, I mean, it's so self-fulfilling though. Like, there's no way that you can do that and then come out with like your power being more stable than it was before, So it's like he got mad at Harry Seldon for predicting the end of the Empire, and he's just doing everything he can to make sure that the end of the Empire is like, cruising into fruition, I think.
I mean, basically, somebody tells you that your empire is ending and you're running the empire.
Yeah.
Maybe you should do things differently than you did before.
Yeah, maybe you should.
Just a thought. Just a thought.
Here's some basic leadership advice in general is like, if people are telling you that there's things that are going wrong, I don't know, go talk to them and listen to their complaints and take them seriously and see if there's anything that you can do to address them.
Why? When you could just blow them up. Just destroy your problems. It's fine.
Right. Yeah.
They'll 100% go away and never come back worse.
Right. You'll definitely not have any further problems at that point. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, I think we've all, or I don't know, maybe some of our listeners haven't yet, but you will probably, and I say this with some regret, you will probably experience working for organizations at some point or interacting with organizations. I mean, heck, anybody who's interacted with the state to any degree will experience this. Where problems fester because they don't get taken seriously, they don't get actually addressed, and the people who are in power care more about maintaining the power than they care about the people that they're actually responsible for in some way, and that is a tragically common occurrence throughout human history. I don't know that it's something that will maybe ever go away to some extent. So there's that, but it is just funny because it's like, I don't know. In a sense, and I kind of made this point in the Out of Frame episode on Dune, that Frank Herbert's writing ultimately is very realistic, even though there's a lot of insane science fiction-y stuff that happens in it, right? But it's ultimately very realistic because the things that human beings do and their motivations and their reasons for doing things actually do make sense. Like, if you lived under those conditions, they did things that you would do or that anybody would do, to try to maintain their power or maintain their position or status or wealth or whatever. And I think you're seeing a lot of that in Foundation, which I would say is a good thing about the series, like, already. I mean, What Lee Pace is doing is the worst thing he could do in a lot of ways, but it's also what emperors have always done. So, it's not like it's like I'm watching Lee Pace and going, oh, I don't know why that guy is doing any of that. No, I know why he's doing it. He's grabbing power tighter and tighter because that's what people with a lot of power tend to do.
Yeah. I mean, people seek power as a means. Yeah. That's how it always starts. But then it becomes the end.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, you had mentioned earlier that there were some things in the second episode in particular where people didn't do things that seemed in character. I'd like to explore that a little bit, and then I think we can
all right,
get into the last bit.
Up front, this is wildly spoilery. If you have not watched episode 2, please disregard this section. Skip ahead because some things happen. All right, that said, at this point, Harry Seldon and Gale and the crew are on a ship and they're headed out to the Outer Rim. And it's going to take them a long time to get there because they were sentenced to a slow ship, which apparently takes,
like
4 years
to
get to travel tens of thousands of light years instead of, like that. So
yeah, I would like to actually do the math on how fast they're still going because it's got to be faster than light.
It's got to be outrageous.
So it's got to be really outrageously fast. But yeah.
So I don't even, whatever.
But it is not like a space folding jump from one place to another kind of situation.
No, not like the other jump ships.
Yes.
So there's that. So they're on the ship and they're trying to figure out how they're going to survive on Terminus is the name of the planet, appropriately enough. And
but then what happens if you find another planet past Terminus?
The
name is really going to get wrecked.
It screws up the naming conventions, doesn't it? Really this is why you should just, take them as they come. But whatever. Neither here nor there. So they're trying to figure out how to survive on this planet that has very harsh conditions. Like it's very cold. It's very inhospitable. There's lots of dangerous creatures and deadly gases, and they have to figure out how to mine and make their own food and all that stuff. It's like a whole thing. And there is a romance between Gale and Raish, who is Harry Seldon's adopted son.
Yeah.
And they're very serious. They're very much in love, and they're talking about spending the rest of their lives together. And it's lovely. Stuff, yeah, it's really lovely. And then at the end of the episode, Raish just straight up stabs Harry to death in his room. No real warning. He's clearly upset about something throughout the episode, but he won't talk to anybody about it. He just seems kind of moody. And you know what? You're stuck on a spaceship for years. Of course you'd be moody.
I think this is one of those things. Obviously it's going to get an explanation, right?
Obviously.
We're going to find out why. But it's so unprepared in the story and in the way that it was
objection.
Edited that it is really out of nowhere. And it also it does absolutely undercut a lot of the other things, because if you're saying I want to spend the rest of my life with you, well, doing this makes that impossible. There's just probably no way to deal with that, right? Especially given that, again, Harry Seldon is sort of deified by everyone, and so somebody who harms him in any way, is not going to be a person that is really allowed to have a normal life once they get where they're going, let alone on the ship for the rest of the time they're, they might as well throw them out an airlock at this point. Who knows?
That seems like what you would do.
Yeah. But I don't think that's the only issue to some extent. I mean, I think you can look at, I always have this problem, especially with kind of action scenes or things that, Prometheus is a really good example of this, where people who are introduced to me as very, very smart, and the entire crew of this ship has been handpicked to go do this very intellectual thing on another planet. They've been picked for their skills, for their creativity, for their abilities, right? Their competence. And then they get in this kind of holodeck situation where they're kind of running through scenarios of what life might be like on the planet. And they do the dumbest things in these scenarios.
Turbo dumb.
Turbo dumb. I mean, like So for example, like Jen said, there's like poisonous gases or flammable gases that are. So you've got a character. I don't even know their names because they're crew, right? They're drilling in the red shirts, basically. They're drilling into this rock surface, and she's drilling. She's already drilling, and only then does somebody look at a scanner and say, "Hey, there's a pocket of gas right where you're drilling. You should be very careful." And then, of course, the gas starts leaking, and look, anybody on Earth today who has, a functioning brain knows that, like, you should, before you drill deep into the ground, you should check to see if there's like gas lines or if there's electric lines or like anything like that you might run into that would be a problem for people. But these thousands, tens of thousands of years into the future, these ultra smart people can't figure out that maybe you should use your scanning technology before you start drilling. And then, by the way, when you've already been told that there's flammable gas oozing out into the atmosphere around you, don't fire an incendiary weapon in the vicinity. Like, there's just things like that where you just go, guys, you got to be smarter than this.
Like, this isn't... My 10-year-olds are better at following directions than that crew was.
Yeah.
It's just...
And I don't have again, I mean, you're gonna need to create challenges for people,
Yeah.
But I really hate it when, and sci-fi, unfortunately, as a genre, has a tendency to do this. I hate it when you establish that these are very smart people doing very dumb things. Because if you didn't establish to me that these were some of the smartest people that they could find and the most competent people that they could find, then I'd be like, okay, so Alien does this really well, right? Like, Alien is a mining crew. They are not the smartest people in the world. They're just some guys who like are truckers, basically. They're miners and truckers.
Blue collar workers.
And so I don't expect them to like be top scientists or be like the most rational thinkers they're just some blue collar dudes. And that's actually what's great. One of the many, many things that's great about Alien is that a lot of the problems that get caused or just that get escalated, I guess I should say, inside there is because they're making like dumb guy decisions about stuff. But I was never told in advance that they were the smartest people in the world, so like I don't expect them to make the smartest decision. And of course, it's Ripley who's like, "Hey guys, don't do that." Like, "Hey, hey, what if we didn't do that? What if we did the smarter thing?" And they're like, "No, we'll do the dumb thing." I'm like, well, okay, terrible things happen. Ripley survives, right? Because Ripley's smarter than they are, and she's just thought it through a little bit more. And she's tougher in some ways. But yeah, I don't know. I agree. Stuff like that. Look, we're only a couple episodes in, so I think I want to wrap it up. If you really like science fiction, this is a gorgeous looking series. It's got promising elements to it. It's a little slow, I think. There's some red flags for me a little bit. But if you're a fan, I would probably check it out. I mean, and of course you've got to have Apple TV and stuff. But like, if you are a fan of science fiction, I think I would check it out. Jen, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is definitely worth at least trying. Okay.
Yeah.
It's got its issues. I could see how it could go a few different ways from here, but we're still very early days in this show.
Yeah.
Not a lot has been revealed to us, so we'll see how it goes. I would recommend at least trying the first episode because it is beautiful. It is really interesting. It has some good potential.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Check it out. Yeah.
For sure.
All right. I think that'll do it for like the main part of this episode. If you are a supporter of Out of Frame on Patreon or Subscribestar, that's patreon.com/outoframeshow or subscribestar.com/outoframeshow. Stick around, and we're going to do some viewer Q&A. We're going to pull from our Discord, I think, today. Also, if you're not a supporter, you can join our Discord. So check out the links in the description for Discord, Instagram, Facebook, and definitely if you're not subscribed on YouTube, please do that. But But yeah, for everybody who is a supporter, stick around. For everybody else, thank you so much for watching or listening, and we will see you next time.